So, let's talk about America's guest list. For a long, long time, the country had a very specific, and let's be honest, a very problematic way of deciding who gets to come to the party. It was called the National Origins Quota System, which sounds complicated, but it was actually pretty simple. It was like a club with a very strict, very biased bouncer. This system, put in place way back in the 1920s, heavily favored immigrants from Northern and Western Europe. Think Britain, Germany, Ireland. If you were from there, the door was wide open. Come on in, have a burger. It was a system designed to keep America looking a certain way, if you know what I mean. But what if you were from, say, Italy, or Poland, or anywhere in Asia or Africa? Well, for you the line was much, much longer. The quotas for these countries were tiny, almost non-existent. It was like they were told, okay, we'll let 2 of you in, but don't make a fuss. The law was based on the US population from decades earlier, basically freezing the country's ethnic makeup in time. It was a policy that said out loud, some people are more desirable immigrants than others. It wasn't just unfair, it was a reflection of the deep-seated prejudices of the era, a time when diversity wasn't exactly a buzzword on anyone's vision board. This whole setup was fundamentally at odds with the American ideal of being a nation of immigrants. It was more like a nation of some immigrants, and we're very particular about which ones. Imagine applying for a job, and the first question isn't about your skills, but about where your grandparents were born. That was American immigration policy. It completely ignored a person's talents, their drive, or their desperate need for a new start. The system was a relic, a stubborn piece of the past that just wouldn't go away, and it was becoming increasingly embarrassing for a country that wanted to be seen as a global leader of freedom and equality. By the 1960s, people were starting to look at this system and say, wait a minute, this is not a good look. The world had changed. The US was in the middle of the Cold War, trying to win hearts and minds across the globe. It's a bit hard to convince people in Africa and Asia that your way of life is the best, when your front door has a sign that basically says, not you. The pressure was building, both from outside and from within. The old discriminatory quota system was on life support, and someone was about to pull the plug. A big change was coming, one that would redefine the face of America forever. So what finally tipped the scales? A huge part of it was the civil rights movement. Right at home, brave activists were marching, protesting, and demanding an end to racial segregation and discrimination. They were holding up a mirror to America and forcing it to confront its ugly history of inequality. This powerful movement for justice wasn't just about voting rights or lunch counters, it was about the very soul of the nation. It raised a massive, unavoidable question. How can America claim to be a beacon of freedom while discriminating against its own citizens based on their skin color? It was a powerful moral argument that you just couldn't ignore. This fight for equality within America's borders naturally spilled over into the immigration debate. It started to seem incredibly hypocritical to fight for racial equality at home while having immigration laws that were explicitly racist. Think about it. You can't pass the Civil Rights Act, which says you can't discriminate against people inside the country, and then turn around and say, but we can definitely discriminate against people who want to come into the country. The logic just falls apart. The ideals of the civil rights movement, equality, fairness, and judging people by their character, not their origin, became the fuel for immigration reform. Now let's talk about the presidents. President John F. Kennedy, himself the great-grandson of Irish immigrants who faced discrimination, was a big critic of the quota system. He called it intolerable. He even wrote a book, A Nation of Immigrants, arguing that the system was illogical and didn't serve the country's interests. Kennedy was laying the groundwork for change, using his platform to make the case for a more just and welcoming immigration policy. He was the one who sent a proposal to Congress to get rid of the national origins formula. He was planting the seeds for a major overhaul of the whole system. Tragically, Kennedy was assassinated before he could see his vision become law. But his successor, President Lyndon B. Johnson, picked up the torch. LBJ was a master politician who knew how to get things done in Washington. Fresh off his historic success with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, he made immigration reform a top priority of his Great Society agenda. Johnson put his full political weight behind the bill, urging Congress to pass it not just for practical reasons, but as a moral imperative. He saw it as the next logical step in building a fairer, more just America, finishing the work that Kennedy had started. Every big law has its champions in Congress, the people who do the hard work of writing the bill and getting the votes. For this one, the main sponsors were 2 dedicated lawmakers, Senator Philip Hart of Michigan, and Representative Emanuel Seller of New York. These guys were the architects of the new immigration system. Seller in particular had been fighting against the quota system for his entire career. He was the son of German Jewish immigrants and had seen firsthand how the restrictive laws of the 1920s had slammed the door on people fleeing persecution in Europe. For him, this wasn't just politics, it was personal. Representative Seller was a powerhouse. He was the chairman of the powerful House Judiciary Committee, and had been introducing bills to reform immigration since the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Well, almost. For decades he was a lonely voice crying out for change, but he never gave up. Senator Hart was a respected liberal Democrat, a World War II veteran known for his integrity and quiet determination. Together, they formed a perfect team to guide the bill through the legislative maze. They argued passionately that the old system was an embarrassment, and that a new one was needed to align America's laws with its founding principles of liberty and opportunity for all. So, what did their new plan, the Hart-Celler Act, actually do? The most revolutionary thing was that it completely abolished the old racist national origins quota system. Gone, thrown in the trash heap of history. Instead of asking "where are you from?" the new system asked "who do you know, and what can you do?" It created a new preference system that prioritized two main groups. The first and biggest group was family members of people already in the U.S. The law emphasized family reunification, saying that if you have a close relative who is a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you should be at the front of the line. The second group was people with specific skills that the U.S. needed. Doctors, engineers, scientists, artists, people with professional talents were given preference. This was a practical move designed to bring in individuals who could contribute to the American economy and society right away. The act also created a new category for refugees, offering a safe haven for people fleeing violence or political persecution. So the new blueprint was simple. It was about family, skills, and humanitarian compassion. It was a total 180-degree turn from the old system, which was based on nothing more than prejudice about where a person was born. When President Johnson signed the Hart-Celler Act into law at the foot of the Statue of Liberty on October 3, 1965, nobody, not even its biggest supporters, predicted how drastically it would change America. At the time, many politicians were downplaying its impact. They were like, "Don't worry, it's not a big deal." Well, spoiler alert, they were completely wrong. The act didn't just tweak the system, it opened the floodgates for immigrants from parts of the world that had been almost entirely shut out for decades. The effect wasn't immediate, but over the next few decades it was massive. Before 1965, the vast majority of immigrants came from Europe. After 1965, the patterns shifted dramatically. The new law, with its focus on family ties, allowed recent immigrants to sponsor their relatives. This created what's known as chain migration. Someone from Korea, Mexico, or India would arrive, become a citizen, and then bring over their spouse, parents, and siblings, who would then do the same. This meant that immigration started coming from all over the globe, especially from Asia and Latin America. The law fundamentally changed the demographics of the country, turning it from a mostly white nation into a truly multicultural society. This new diversity has had a profound impact on every aspect of American life. Just walk down the street in any major city today, you'll hear dozens of different languages. You can eat food from any corner of the world, from Vietnamese pho to Ethiopian injera to Colombian arepas. Our music, our art, our businesses, our science labs, they have all been enriched by the contributions of immigrants who came to America because of this law. The act helped build the vibrant, dynamic, and sometimes complicated society we live in today. It's the reason your doctor might be from Nigeria, your favorite restaurant owner from El Salvador, and the tech genius who designed your phone from Taiwan. So, the Hart-Celler Act was more than just a piece of legislation. It was a turning point in the American story. It was a moment when the country decided to try to live up to its own hype. It replaced a system based on prejudice with one based on family and skills. It didn't solve every problem with immigration, of course. The debates are still raging today. But it set the United States on a new path. One that led to a more diverse, more complex, and, you could argue, a more interesting America. It was a legislative act that literally changed the face of the nation, one immigrant at a time.